Are you there, Stu?
I am, yeah. We could start. It's everyone listening. If you've heard it before, you know it's audio only anyway, the podcast. So I guess this would be normal. So let's start.
Yeah, let's go for it.
I'm working on it. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Kath. Well, thank you everyone for being here. It's a real pleasure to do it live and have an audience. And Catherine, of course, as Kath just explained, is a well-known UK advocate doing many great things over the last few years for advocacy globally, not just in the UK. She's been on my show twice before, so if you enjoy this conversation, definitely check that out, and you can find it on any podcast app or Spotify. So let's get into it. Catherine, how are you first of all?
I'm good, thank you. I'm really good. Had the last couple of minutes of a tech fret, as you like to have, when you're about to go live, but I'm calm again now and I'm ready to go. How are you?
I'm good. A little nervous because it's live and obviously I don't do it live, but it's fine. We'll keep going. So, Catherine, you have shared your story a couple of times on the show, but for those that haven't heard the story, it'd be good just to kind of introduce your story and what got you into advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go over it really, really briefly because it is pretty much everywhere now. So I kind of knew that I had OCD. It was very stereotypical OCD of just like kind of washing things with my hands, checking switches, looking out the window to see when people were going to come home, check they're okay. I realise now it was very much about keeping people safe. And it kind of came and went. It never really stopped me doing anything or achieving the things I wanted to. But after I had my son, my pregnancy was absolutely fine. It was brilliant. I felt better than ever. And after I had my son, I started getting intrusive thoughts, and they were really, really grim. And they kind of started off just by, I don't know, the cat might sit on him, or something might accidentally happen to him, and then it grew to the point where someone might accidentally hurt him or drop him, and then it kind of became, someone might deliberately do that, and then it became me. It's like there was nothing else left to torture me with, really, and it became the fact that I was going to be the person to do this on purpose. And there was a lot of external compulsions with that, but I still didn't realise they were OCD. I just thought it kind of made sense to do what I was doing. But the internal compulsions were incredibly painful. I used to review my past. I used to review whether I was a good person or not, constantly look for evidence. I spent all my time, like 24 hours a day, just in this absolutely awful place, and got critically ill. It took me a long time of fighting to get treatment. There were misunderstandings along the way. And when my little boy, William, was about 4, I eventually got a diagnosis, mainly because I'd fought for one, and I searched a lot on Google to try and find out what was going on, and then had amazing CBT and ERP therapy on the NHS. I appreciate I was very lucky to have a very good service on my doorstep, and I did get seen pretty quickly. But, kind of a lot of, we're being asked to start our video.
Hey everyone.
You see me?
Yeah.
Excellent. So it just became this real I was kind of over the worst of the OCD, but I was left with a lot of anger, a lot of grief. I couldn't believe the things that some people had told me along the way. I couldn't believe the misconception, and I wanted to start spreading the word about it in a very positive way, in a very creative way. And so that's where Tame and Olivia started, really. But it was, underneath that real acceptance and everything it was a tactic that helped me. It really helped me when it came to trying separating myself and the intrusive thoughts. It was basically just to try and stop other people having gone through what I did. So it was trying to send a really positive message, but I won't lie, there was quite a lot of rage in the motivation as well, which I think is understandable. It was a horrible few years.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think anger is such a drive of any kind of social change.
Yes.
It's a powerful fuel, when harnessed right and not let it destroy you. Which I think you've harnessed well.
Thank you.
So something you said, which I think is worth highlighting, you said about you were just stuck in your head sort of 24 hours a day, trying to find evidence, disprove it, prove it, whatever it is. Obviously, mainly disprove it. Obviously rumination is a seemingly invisible compulsion. And it's obviously something you were doing a lot, but to the outside, people probably said you were fine. Maybe you look a bit worried, but you weren't clearly doing physical compulsions. I just thought that was worth highlighting, because I mean, that's why a lot of people go misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed for many years, is they are definitely doing compulsions, in regards to pure O. It's just entirely in their head and you can't see it.
Well, how do you show it? It was only when people noticed that I was losing a lot of weight, suddenly looking very poorly, very tearful, very closed up, that I started to get help. And that was obviously, I was way down the road by that point, and also the compulsions, it was all about keeping my boy safe. So yes, a lot of them were about trying to prove that actually I was a good person, I was a safe person to be around him. But a lot of that time was also spent in the murky world of, do you remember that time when you were 15 and you really did that thing and that hurt that person? Because I wanted to know one way or the other, and I accepted that the result of my ruminations might be, my goodness, I am evil. But at least with that knowledge, I could then go off and remove myself from his care. So whatever the answer was, I mean, obviously I would have preferred it to be the positive one, but even if it was negative, at least then that meant that I could keep him safe. So it was a grim time.
Absolutely. And I just realized I should say, I'm dedicating the last 20 minutes to your guys' questions. So if anything, Catherine, or I say sparks a question or curiosity in your mind, just pop it in the Q&A field thing, wherever it is. And I'll try my best to ask Catherine those questions at the end. So at what point did Pete, your husband, did he clock on, or did you tell him? Yeah.
I had told him, but I mean, we all come at it at our own experience. So Pete was well versed in the world of intrusive thought. And I remember him saying once, well, I had a worry that I was going to kick you when you were pregnant. I was worried I was going to kick you in the stomach briefly, and so he kind of viewed it as someone of just like, we all get that, don't we? And I remember he works on a building site and he was at the top of Canary Wharf and he said to his mate, he was telling his mate about perinatal OCD, and he was like, oh, my wife was very upset and very worried about, these thoughts she was having about harming the baby. And even this guy was like, that's normal, isn't it? So most people, people without OCD kind of, might cause a bit of anxiety, but he came at it like, it's anxiety. It's anxiety. And also, there was an element of us being very frightened. You don't hear, you kind of assume that you're going to go to your GP and tell them things. We'd also had a bit of an incident with a midwife where I went to disclose that I was feeling particularly depressed, and they had mentioned child protection and social services, and I've managed to kind of reverse what I was talking about and just kind of turn it into baby blues. The best, I deserved an Oscar for that performance. I really did. So he, we had this whole kind of, should we go and get help? Should we not go and get help? Is this something that she's just, people were saying it was hormones. We were waiting for it to end. So he was incredibly supportive. This poor man had basically a brand new newborn who he was caring for 24 hours a day, and a wife who was living on the sofa, refusing to, leave the room, and refusing to go anywhere near the baby. So the fact that he was even capable of any sort of logical thought at that point is pretty miraculous. But he came with me to the GP and he's been with me every step of the way since. It's been amazing. Yeah. Don't know how he does it.
Yeah, good for him. That's really good. And yeah, you said there about kind of your ordeal with midwives, or a midwife, or whatever it is. Was it midwife? Sorry, was that who it was?
It was a midwife, actually, yes. Yeah. And a health visitor told me something very, very similar as well. And then strangely, another health visitor wrote in my red book that there was no sign of any form of like mental illness in me whatsoever, even though I had actually stated that I wasn't feeling well. I want to make it clear this is not me blaming anyone. I think it's just people very stretched, maybe a lack of training in OCD and stuff like that. So
absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to highlight it because not because I want anyone to be triggered or worried if they're pregnant or want to get pregnant,
of course,
but because you turn that seemingly negative experience into something positive, which was you wrote an article for the Journal of Midwifery, which to me still seems like a made-up word, but the Journal for Midwives in the UK. And I think it's an open access article, so anyone can get it. So and that you explain what maternal OCD is, and you're basically trying to educate midwives. Where could, if someone is pregnant or wants to get pregnant and feels my midwife needs to read this, what would they search to find that?
If you just put Catherine Benfield perinatal OCD in Google, it should come up. So it's the BJM.
Yeah.
Not the other way around. I always get confused with the medical journal. BJM. Yeah, absolutely. And I should give a massive credit to them, because actually that should be a paid for article. And as soon as they started getting feedback on it and realised how desperately it was needed, they opened it for all. And it is an excellent resource to be able to just print out and go and say, look, I haven't got the words for this. Yeah. So please just read that. You know, exactly. It's had a lot of really good feedback.
Yeah, it's a good article. And because we had a child last year, and my wife was experiencing intrusive thoughts and lots of anxiety. She never pursued an OCD diagnosis, but when the midwife came round after, it was like 2 weeks of my daughter being born, my wife was sharing all of this, sort of the harm and worries, and the midwife, to her credit, did say, you know, it's just intrusive thoughts. She was really, in a good way, blasé about it, like it's nothing to worry about, you know, it's normal. And so I wonder, because, you know, there's a good 10 years between your son and my daughter. So hopefully things have changed, and that could even been a result of your article, you know, that why that midwife was so clued up.
I hope so. I do hear from people every now and again. That kind of say, oh, my midwife showed me your article, or she told me to go and check out your work and stuff like that. So it is getting out there, but also the amazing work of maternal OCD, you know, and I think it's also much easier for people to just Google it now. You know, I remember when I first Googled, you know, fear of harming son and OCD, which, by the way, was a tenuous link. It was sheerly desperation that led me to that. And I just, you know, the only thing that I could find was this article from The Sun that was very stereotypical, you know. There aren't other red top papers. I don't know how I'm supposed to say that. But we were literally at the point where there was nothing there. But now you can literally say, right, okay, perinatal OCD, intrusive thoughts, harm-based intrusive thoughts. It's all becoming more of a common vocabulary, you know. So you can just key into Google and find the support you need. You know, and that will go for medical staff too. They can do exactly the same thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And just got a note from Kath to say people weren't let in. So the first 12 minutes has been you and I, Catherine. So no one else has heard that. So we'll leave it as it is. Everyone just join in. Catherine was just given a brief summary of her story, but you can go listen to my first episode with her where we talk for like an hour and a half on her story. And Kath is saying it's been recorded, so you can watch the first 12 minutes back later. But I'll just summarize that last bit was about postpartum OCD, Catherine's experience, and as a result, she wrote an article for the British Journal of Midwifery. So if you are pregnant or you're getting pregnant and your midwife doesn't seem to know what OCD is, definitely share that with him or her, and that should really educate them. And just type Catherine Benfield perinatal OCD or something similar and you should find it. Okay, so you know, you got help. Just before we talk about advocacy, what was your process of getting the right therapy?
It was a mixture of, I've got to say, a mixture of luck that I've got the postcode that I have. I have to say that. I do realise I was very lucky. But I'd gone to the GP a few times and I was recommended medication. I didn't really know anything about the type of therapy to ask for. And it was when I started finding things online that I realised, I should be asking for cognitive behavioural therapy. So I knew to go into my doctor and to actually say, I would like this, please. There was still no OCD diagnosis. You know, we all just thought I was a bit generally anxious and depressed. And it was only when I rang the number, which was IAPT, so the self-referral psychological services for where I live, and I had my assessment, that they kind of, I realise now they'd included an OCD assessment within it. I recognise the questions that they asked me. I've seen them since. And within, I think, about 3 weeks, I had started therapy with the absolutely amazing Ruji Rahman. Looking back, I think they may have shoved me in pretty quickly because I know answering those questions, I was very honest. And then I had a full 20 weeks of learning loads of different bits. But before I could even start ERP, I know we've spoken about this before, I had to do a massive amount of self-esteem work. I had to do loads of stuff on kindness and self-compassion. And because by that point, I literally thought I was a monster and I believed all these terrible things I said about myself. So that's how it all started, really. And that's where the compassion of Tame and Olivia came from. But it was very much a case of me having to push. And then as soon as I was in the proper services, it all took off from there. They were amazing.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And yeah, because obviously you were just given birth when you got therapy, right? Is that correct? Or?
No, it was 18 months later, really horrendous months later. Yeah, 18 months later, I'd got medication from 2 months onwards. So from that point, I kind of plateaued. So there were no real highs, there were no real lows. But I mean, that medication, I'm still on low dose now. It's amazing. But it was the therapy that started when Will was 18 months old that changed everything, because before that, I just kept relapsing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, because I know when you're pregnant or just postpartum, they see you much quicker, as far as I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, there's 2 people involved now. There's always more.
They have extended it. They have extended it. So it used to be a year where you were in the perinatal kind of space. And I think, don't quote me on this, and it'd be well worth checking out Fiona Challicum and maternal OCD, but I think they've extended that because they're recognising, particularly for things like OCD, you are spending the first few months walking the road of misdiagnosis and kind of not really wanting to talk to people about your thoughts. But I just watched a bit of maternal OCD earlier, the chat they did before us, and they were saying that, at any point you go and talk to them and see what they can do, because even if you're 3 years down the line, you can still get support, 6 years down the line.
Exactly. And having a kid at any age is stressful. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you need help. I'm talking for myself now. So anyone that's just joined, I'm in 13 minutes, I'm going to stop speaking or asking Catherine questions, and I'm going to ask her your questions for the final 20 minutes. So if anything Catherine or I say sparks a question, please put it in the Q&A field below. Yeah, and if you missed the start of it, that's fine. You can watch it later if you want on the OCD Action website. So let's shift to talk a bit about advocacy. So OCD is portrayed in a poor way at times. It's getting much better. Let's face it, last couple of years is way better than 20 years ago, or even 10 or even 5. And you've done a lot over the last 5-6 years to kind of change that. And you initially did it with your BBC article, which was on the homepage for you know better than me, but at least a week, if not way more.
Yeah, it was about 10 days.
Oh, wow,
I was wondering if they were ever going to take it down.
so that, apart from maybe Chinese websites, because they have 1-something billion people, BBC News is probably one of the busiest homepages in the world, because it gets visitors globally, which is incredible, for an OCD article. And the only... knowing how websites work, it only stayed on that homepage, not because someone wanted it to, but because it was getting enough traffic that it stayed high, which is incredible.
Good.
Yeah. Which means the demand was there. People wanted it, but in a sad way, it also means how many people were actually affected by it.
Yes. Yeah.
So as a community, how can we kind of start to change the perception, I guess?
I think it's really important that, we think about what we have space for in our lives. A lot of us are very busy, and this doesn't need to become something that just becomes, something else that we have to do. Think about where it's coming from, this energy and attention and stuff. I think we need to talk more openly about it. It's difficult because if you're out with a friend or one-on-one and they go, oh, my OCD, car's got to be cleaned a certain way, it's very difficult to then challenge that. So I absolutely don't suggest doing that. Your friendship's really important. But we need to start thinking about how we can support people telling their story. We need to think about how we challenge. In my experience, people don't like being told what to do, and they don't like being called out. So I think in a very positive way of sharing the reality of the condition. I think if you don't actually want to share your story yourself, there's loads of other ways you can do it by trying to support people. It's writing into people as well. Every now and again, there's a show that does a really horrendous job with OCD and sets us back miles in terms of awareness, and it's writing off to those people. It's saying, do you know what, no, that's not okay. Here are the charities that you could talk to. So all of us in our own little way could address this and start to change the shift. It's already happening, don't get me wrong, it's brilliant, but all of us have got our own little ways that we could start to push actually what real OCD is, even if it's just sharing the stories of those who are willing to share. So there's loads of little things we can do.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you've probably noticed this, and I know you're actually much more involved with the media than I am. But like, I'd say over the last month, I had 3 different TV networks or producers come to me just asking to talk about OCD because they're doing some documentary or TV show, and they clearly want to get their facts straight, which is a wonderful thing, you know. They're actually doing their research now and thinking, hang on a minute, we don't actually know what this is. So onto that then, you're now involved in a short film. It'd be good to kind of, whatever you can share or talk about that, it'd be good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a bit gutted because everything was meant to be sorted during the week and I was going to tell you absolutely everything, but there's a few things I'll have to hold back on just for a little while, but hopefully before too long I can tell you all of it. So I'm working on a short film called Waving, which is ridiculously exciting. There is a household UK named actor attached to it, who hopefully I'll be able to talk about very, very soon. Most people know who he is.
Hugh Grant.
Huh?
Hugh Grant.
No, it's only 9 minutes long. We haven't got time for all that bumbling. You know, we've got to get things out. But it's absolutely amazing. It's written by oh my gosh, I've just totally forgotten his name. Steve Bromwell. I was still thinking about the actor and trying not to say that. Who is a writer with OCD, and it is absolutely incredible. And Rolfin Nyhus is the director. A lot of knowledge about mental health, mental illness. It is going to be absolutely amazing. It is intense. It's dark. There's an element of the art house about it. And I was sent a script and I couldn't breathe while I was reading it because it was OCD with intrusive thoughts. So it's basically about a man who is wrestling with intrusive thoughts, and he is struggling to stay with his family because they're just getting too much. And what has been absolutely amazing by this about this is that normally when you're showing OCD in the media, it's really hard to show the obsessions, but it's very easy to show the compulsions because they always do the switch flicking or the hands being washed at the sink. You know, of course that is OCD too, but they never, what do you do to show intrusive thoughts? Just show someone standing there. But this, because it's partially our art house, has got some of the most amazing strategies to do with the lighting and the work that's going to be done post-production to show how the compulsions are working. So there'll be like mental review, or there'll be these images that just shoot up on the screen to show what it is that he's seeing. It is, you know, there are elements of the violent about it and stuff, you know, so whereas I wouldn't necessarily recommend this be something that you'll want to sit down and watch and be thrilled that it's, you know, sharing the story of OCD, there is absolutely no doubt that anyone who watches it will never use OCD wrong again, you know, and it is 9 minutes. So if you have got someone around you who's using it completely wrong a lot of the time, you can go sit down and 9 minutes and, you know, it's sorted. But it's incredible. It is going to be the first of its kind internationally. Oh, and we're also working with Ethan Smith, who's utterly amazing, and he's the second executive producer alongside me, and he does loads of amazing work with the IOCDF over in America. So we have got an incredible team working on this, and it's about to go into production. So we're about to start filming.
Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I think, what came to me, and you did caveat it there, was this feels like a film not for people with OCD, like especially at least if they're in the grips of it, but it needs to be that shocking and that scary, if I can use that word, because as you say, so then someone who doesn't have OCD watches it and they're going to be like, I'm never going to use that term incorrect again.
Exactly. And it does end on a note of hope, you know, and I love the fact that it's got a male lead, and I love the fact that he's having intrusive thoughts about, you know, all sorts of things happening to his family and stuff like that. I love that. And you know, it's the art house scene has a load of people really dedicated to it anyway. So the amount of people who don't know about OCD properly will be pulled in and they will learn. The main actor has got a massive following, quite a cult following. So that will pull all of those people in as well. So instead of kind of working within the OCD community, which of course is amazing, hopefully we're going to be scooping up people who have OCD and don't realise they have it, and we can pull them into the community, because there's going to be loads of like social media stuff happening behind the scenes as well.
That's incredible. Yeah, and I'll do my best to push it. And if you need any supporting actors, I'm there. I don't think I can act, but I'll do my best.
You'll be like a tree in the background or something. I'm going to try and nick and scene. I'll be like,
mime artist.
Photobomb.
So this isn't, so everyone is in 5 minutes. I'm going to ask your questions. So please load them in the Q&A chat section now. If you have one, ask Catherine anything. I can't say the person's name because we've got to keep anonymity, but they said, this isn't a question, but I just wanted to say that the BBC article is what enabled me to seek help 6 months ago. I used it to explain to my family what was going on, who have been so understanding. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. So that's lovely.
Oh, that is lovely. Thank you. I'm so pleased to hear that.
Yeah, it's really nice.
It's not always easy talking about this stuff. Sometimes I just think, oh, I can't talk about it anymore. And then, you just know that it's just so helpful, that it's so helpful. Yeah. I'm really pleased.
I agree. And that's part of advocacy. It can become repetitive and exhausting at times. But then when you hear messages like that, it just kind of makes sense and you just feel refueled.
Oh no, exactly. You just take a bit of a step out. I'm talking this afternoon at 3 in the community room, and it's all about advocacy, and we're talking about stuff like that as well, like looking after yourself and then coming back stronger, recharging.
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 minutes left. Just quickly tell us about Taming Olivia, your blog.
Okay, so it was about in therapy, I couldn't quite get the idea that, I wasn't these intrusive thoughts. I was told by my doctor and my therapist that it was OCD, and I was just like, yeah, right, whatever. But Taming Olivia really helped me to kind of separate myself from my thoughts. And it was a strategy that worked for me. I hadn't written anything since uni. And I just wrote it down to try and help me. And then we thought with Pete's animation and all the drawings and everything, we thought it would actually help other people. And so we just thought that we would bring out one post on it and see how it went. And it has just grown from there. So basically, it's the idea that it helps you to separate yourself, but it's positive. So I know a lot of people were encouraged to think of their OCD separately as a bully and stuff. And I just thought, well, OCD is horrendous. I don't want to imagine this. And I know that children were being told to do that as well. I imagine this horrible bully being around you. And I just thought, no, I've struggled with finding self-compassion and to feel kindness towards myself and to recognise my achievements. And maybe through Olivia, the way it's helped me, I can help others. And so I went off for about 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, talking pretty steadily about maternal OCD. But I'm coming back to Taming Olivia now, and we're going to try and think about things to do with children, how maybe it could appeal to children, not in a kind of really dark, intrusive thoughts way, but about self-acceptance and kindness and compassion and, accepting certain things. And I would really love to, I've been working with a lot of men recently and in teams of men, and I supported my own friend quite recently. And I would really like to start focusing things so that it's not just mums. I mean, it was never just mums. I just end up talking about perinatal OCD a lot, but I want to try and encompass everyone now. So we're changing, like the animations have changed. You'll see that we've now got this Pete draws using technology now, as opposed to like tracing paper and printed out pictures of me. So we're evolving, and we're going to try, and that sounds very professional. We don't actually know what we're doing half the time, but we're going to try and get it to encompass more people, just to try and spread the word about using creativity, because we are a creative bunch, us lot, aren't we? And kindness and self-compassion, and to try and get those core skills learned, and I will do that working alongside therapists and professionals to check everything I'm doing, because I just think that's the basis of everything then. My ERP didn't work until I'd learned all that stuff, so it's gonna change a little bit, but it'll still be Taming Olivia. And she's still a massive mare half the time.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I like that, you said about the things you had to do before ERP for it to work. I know there's no one size fits all. It's not come into my consulting room 2 sessions later, we're doing ERP and you're fixed. It's maybe there's a lot of baggage and stuff we need to work on first.
Well, you're not just OCD, are you?
Yeah.
You've got other things to do. I've been working on other stuff since, so it's just, absolutely. It seems the right thing to do.
Very much so. And there's an episode, I'm really not to plug it, but I will, this Sunday, about functional analytics psychotherapy used alongside ERP. And that talks more about the relational aspects of ERP, not just what's happening inside you, but what's happening between you and other people and how that negatively affects the OCD itself. Which is a really interesting perspective, and people might find that interesting. So we've got a couple of questions. So everyone else, please load them up. And then if we run out of questions, I've got more. So the first one was, and again, I should say, I'm not going to say any names, so you'll be anonymous. How do you cope with a relapse?
Okay, so 7 years ago, I would have said by crying a lot and talking to my husband a lot about it. I've learned a lot about acceptance and commitment therapy, and that actually started with your podcast with Stephen Hayes. Was it episode number 4? It was absolutely amazing. So thank you, Stu. I owe you for that one. I learned a lot about how not to judge, and again, all of that acceptance and kind of work on being kind to me and showing myself self-compassion. I've actually done so much work on that now, it's natural. So when I have a relapse, I go with it. I stick in the things that I know work. And it's not always easy. You know, one of my obsessions got particularly bad, almost bad enough, like, you know, to really kind of, it starts to impact my day-to-day life. And I was just very, you know, patient with myself. I mean, you're walking a fine line. You don't want to be patient to the point where you're giving in all the time and you're back to square, or you'll never be back to square one, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to be so patient I excused the compulsions that I was doing, but I also had to realise, I looked at where I was in my life, what had happened recently, am I stressed out, have I been eating properly, you know, and so I can deal with it in a non-judgmental way, because dealing with a relapse is horrendous and painful at times, isn't it? But then to beat yourself up on top of it is just really, really mean. So it was learning those strategies. Practicing, I wrote self-compassion letters to myself sometimes when I had a bit more time, and just really just being very kind to me, knocking off stuff that I didn't have to do, etc., just focusing on me and getting me better.
Yeah, really, really good point. Compassion's huge. And I think if it's a relapse, you haven't done therapy and it kind of OCD went away, now it's come back, then do therapy. But if you've done lots of therapy, ERP, for example, CBT, and you know it helped you initially, you have the tools now to use it again. Yes. There's no different. But maybe you do need to go back to see a CBT therapist, because we all need that helping hand and that guidance from a professional from time to time. But maybe you're a real whiz kid now at ERP and you don't need CBT therapy. Maybe there's more relational type of therapy you could do alongside while you're implementing the things you learned from CBT before. Who knows what kind of triggered it? So there's lots there, lots of information, but I think you said, like you said, you're not starting from square one. Have some compassion, because as soon as you beat yourself up, you add into your problems. It's not just OCD, it's other stuff you have now if you
absolutely
bully yourself. Okay, so next one. How in Wales is my experience so much worse than I'm hearing from the speaker?
How in Wales?
So I think what they mean is, I'm guessing getting therapy, not that OCD is worse in Wales. It doesn't geographically change.
Okay, so I think, I know that I was very, very lucky. Okay, so I'm part of the North East London Foundation Trust, and they are known for being they're used as exemplars of excellent practice, you know, so I was incredibly, incredibly lucky. Sadly, I know even people who are just a few boroughs across don't get the same kind of support. What I can say to that is that there's been a massive project of turning the map green, which has been run by the Maternal Mental Health Alliance. I think it's them, or it might be I think it's them. And it's about trying to improve services absolutely everywhere. So it depends when it was that you needed to access those services. But there are massive drives at the moment to make sure that people, wherever they are in the country, I think that map was almost green, has somewhere where they can go. And I know as well, Wales has just had the most incredible perinatal mental health centre opened. There was a lot about that in the press. So I think sadly it might be a case that, you know, it just wasn't there at the time that the person asked the question may have needed it to be. I suppose sometimes it's just It's just down to the services that are in your area, and it shouldn't be that way, and there are people fighting it. But there's also things like there's online support, isn't there, now as well? There's a lot of things happening.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd add to that is, this is an OCD Action conference. They have a very good support line. If you don't want to call, I recommend calling them. But if social anxiety gets in the way, then you can email them. And they're great at, this is what's gone on for me. This is my history of trying to get treatment. What do you advise? They can advise how to campaign for yourself. Talk about the NICE guidelines. It says, I need CBT. They'll tell you probably where in Wales you can get help. They'll say, if you've had this, this, and this, these are your options now. So they'll be able to consult with you. So definitely use the charity, because the NHS is wonderful, but it can be a bit of a minefield. And OCD Action, that's their job, seemingly, to really advocate and get help for people. So definitely don't kind of try and navigate the system by yourself, because I don't think the doctors understand it sometimes.
And also, if there's anyone else who's pregnant at the moment or is dealing with perinatal OCD, there's a couple of things recently. So I was part of the Skype group where Fiona Shallicombe is actually starting online CBT and ERP for perinatal OCD. It's going to be like a kind of not an app, but a website that you do alongside a therapist who's been properly trained in it. And also on Wednesday, I think it was, I spoke to the OCD Action Perinatal OCD group, and it was amazing. And you know what? Some people chose not to speak at all. There were people there who were obviously listening but didn't feel comfortable saying anything, and that's absolutely fine as well. It was an amazing group, amazingly supportive, and I wish I'd known about it. So that's there, and they've got loads of others as well. It's like every night of the week they've got different support groups.
And how will they find that?
I've posted about it recently, so if they have a look on any of my social media, or if you just go onto OCD Action website and just have a look down, is it How We Can Help? It will just be there. There'll be a search menu, key it in, and it's about the different Zoom meetings. And honestly, you can be invisible. No one will know. It's fine.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is joining support groups. A, for the support, which is important when you're really struggling, but B, people have different experiences, and they've had different sort of success rates at getting various treatments, and you'll learn from each one of them what they did to navigate to get the right help.
Yes.
Which is huge, and just feeling not alone is so important.
Yes.
So the next question is, thank you guys so far for the questions. If you could say one thing to a person that thinks they might have OCD but is reluctant to get help, what would you say?
I would say, and this doesn't strictly come, actually, I should have spoken about this earlier when we were talking about perinatal OCD. I would say, and this doesn't, if you're supporting that person, if it's not you and you're supporting that person, I would absolutely speak to the charities. You've got the option of being anonymous. I would find out what kind of thing you can do to get support. Maybe share support stories or success stories of where people have got support, their life has got so much better. Or if that's you, or if we're also dealing with intrusive thoughts that come with a worrying kind of nature, again, or one that you'll be worried to share with, your health visitor or your doctor, again, talk to the charities. They have advocacy teams who can go in and they can talk to you. There's loads of resources that you can pull off. And the women from maternal OCD, and this is just for anyone who's having intrusive thoughts of the nature you might worry about or might worry about disclosing, you don't have to tell your GP. You just go in and you say, I'm having intrusive thoughts. I think it's OCD. They're causing me a lot of worry, a lot of upset. It's affecting me day to day. And I want to get put through, please, to someone who could help me. I want therapy. And then you can interview them. You can say, look, what do you know about OCD? What do you know about the role of intrusive thoughts in OCD? So you don't have to make yourself vulnerable. I think people imagine that you only say what it is once you're in front of someone will understand you. So if it's because of the nature of the intrusive thoughts that you don't want to go and get help, know that you don't actually need to share that with anyone who'll be unqualified. And if your GP says, well, I can't help you unless you tell me, that's not true. Get another GP, ask for someone else in the surgery, because I did hear someone say that. It's just not right. But I mean, the ladies at maternal OCD Action, they know, they've gone through all of this before. There is nothing you can tell them. I mean, I've told them some stuff over the time, believe me, and there's nothing you can tell them they haven't had before. So if you're reluctant to go out and get medical help, talk to them, talk to someone, reach out to the communities.
really good points. I just pasted a link. So if it wasn't for the person that asked it, but it was for family member, it's a family member who's concerned about someone who's refusing treatment. I interviewed John Abramowitz, and he recently wrote a book called The Family Guide to Getting Over OCD. But I interviewed him if you don't want to get the book or read it. And that talks about people who refuse treatment and what you can do effectively. But yeah, if it is for the person as well, as you kind of say there, I'll be curious, what you're afraid of. Because the one thing I'd say is just go get help. It's as simple as that. But really, there's clearly something blocking whoever it is. And it is probably some kind of fear of, as you say, of being seen as a monster or a lunatic or whatever it is. And these professionals, there's nothing they haven't heard before. So yeah, again, use OCD Action and they'll be able to hopefully reassure you enough to get treatment. But thank you for the question. Okay, next question. What's your number one way of showing kindness to yourself?
I think it's my internal voice. Okay, so I mean, I would love to be able to kind of say, oh, I make sure that I don't find relaxing things that are meant to be relaxing. I don't find a bath relaxing. I don't find, I've struggled to kind of get into yoga, so it's not always an activity. It can be not doing things. So I knock things from my schedule. I try to make more space to chill out, play computer games, do whatever it is that I enjoy doing. But it is my internal dialogue and I try to catch it, because it used to be just this endless stream of just horrible thoughts and saying such awful things to me. And I use the strategies that I learned in therapy to kind of try and deal with them. So I might look at is this black and white thinking? Is this all or nothing thinking? Is this actually reflective of reality? And also sometimes it's just accepting that they're there. I don't want to suddenly involve myself in these massive compulsions of arguing with my thoughts, so if it keeps going on, I'll just be like, yeah, whatever, and kind of get on with what I'm doing. So it's not something that I do physically, it's the way I kind of just deal with those thoughts that we have that are just there all the time,
Yeah, really good point. Watch how you speak to yourself.
Yeah.
Because we're often a lot meaner than we realize. The next one is, do you find that the people in the UK don't know as much about ERP as the US, for example? And also, how do you explain to people that aspects of CBT can be useful for OCD, but other aspects maybe not as helpful? I'd just jump in while you're thinking.
What would you say there? Go on.
I'd say the US probably is slightly more clued up.
Yes.
A big one for that is in America, advocates and therapists, when they're talking about treatment for OCD, first of all, say ERP, and they talk about ERP. In the UK, we have this habit of saying you need CBT. And for those that aren't aware, CBT, there's many tools, one of which is ERP. So in America, there's much more of a move to talk about ERP, whereas we kind of say CBT first, which I think is confusing. I think it's good because in the UK, people don't call themselves ERP therapists, they call themselves CBT therapists. But the problem is I've heard stories where people go to a CBT therapist and they've been in it for 2 years and they haven't done ERP. So that's the downside of that. And then, I guess that answers the second point about some aspects of CBT not being as helpful. I'm not going to say they're not helpful, they're not as helpful. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. That's what I was going to say. In my experience, people seem quite open to talking about it in the US compared to here. Yeah.
I think it cuts through the noise. People know exactly. There's no like, oh, I've got CBT, but we've only just learned about ERP.
Yeah.
This isn't a question, but they say great session. Thank you very much. Next one is, what does recovery mean for you?
Recovery means, I'm going to use the V word, it's being able to live my life according to my values. I know we see lots of people talk about this, but it's having enough space to be able to do the things that I enjoy and be present. So, I might have forced myself to go and enjoy the things that I did, but my brain would be elsewhere. It's actually doing the things that I enjoy and being present for them. that's the thing that I enjoy the most from recovery. You know, my OCD was so bad that I didn't know who I was when I entered into recovery. I didn't know what my hobbies were. I didn't know what I enjoyed. I didn't really know properly what food I liked. You know, everything had been so in my head. So the best thing about recovery is actually being where I am and doing what I'm doing and noticing things other than just what OCD is trying to niggle at me. So that has been the number one thing, being able to enjoy my life.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. Let's ask another question because I realize time. So I know Olivia, which is what you call your OCD, can cause a lot of pain, but is there anything you love about her or that you're grateful for about her?
So, I see Olivia, I used to see her as just this real pain for OCD, but I don't know if you're aware of John Hirschfield's book. I talk about John Hirschfield's all the time, his book on mindfulness for CBT. And he does a bookcase analogy, which is really difficult to try and explain. But he talks about the fact that, you know, as people with OCD, we are very aware of peripheral thoughts, you know, those that for a lot of people are just on the edge of consciousness. You know, we don't really pay attention to them. And you can have a positive side and you can have a negative side. And that negative side is where OCD lives. And the positive side is where your creativity and your sensitivity and all these other things lie, you know, because if you're aware of more of your thoughts, it's not just the negative stuff. So I used to think Olivia lied just where the disordered thinking was. And actually I'm starting to see it like she kind of represents just these almost peripheral thoughts. Yes, there's a downside I have to deal with OCD and how difficult that can be at times. But on the other side, you know, I've learned so much about me. I know that having spent a lifetime thinking I'm not creative at all, I am actually really creative. I'm not a bad writer. It's taken me 4 years of doing Taming Olivia to kind of be able to say that about myself, you know. And so like the whole side of the more positive sides of my personality and the more positive awareness things, you know, the fact that I'm ridiculously kind, I help other people because I notice a lot, you know, so that whole Olivia thing and just, again, helping with kindness and compassion, even the fact that I've been able to say those positive things about myself has been because of the work I've done with Olivia. You know, so yes, there have been positive sides. I don't hate her. I don't hate her at all. I think she's I mean, I obviously know she's not real, but I think that is a representation of a vulnerable, very creative kind of being that just deserves a lot of love. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, spot on. There's a point here, someone saying, I'm being offered behavioral experiments as part of CBT. Is that the same as ERP? It's not, but I sometimes will use a behavioral experiment with my young clients before doing ERP of just saying like a real low exposure that's only going to cause them like 2-3 anxiety. Just this week, try not doing that compulsion once. Come back to me and tell me, what was it like for you? How did it feel? What did you think? And that's effectively a behavioral experiment. So I'm not doing exposure. I'm just getting them to see, actually, I didn't do the compulsions and it wasn't as bad as I thought, which is what I hope they say. They don't always say that. But then I go into ERP. So it depends. There's nothing wrong with it as long as ERP's attached to it at some point. So maybe just speak to them, say, after this, are we going to do ERP? Was this part of the ERP even? Just question that. So I've only got a minute left, and I want to say there's lots of other questions in the chat. So thank you for everyone. There's lots of people in different situations, some still really struggling, which is understandable. So all I'm going to say is don't struggle alone. And just use people like OCD Action, give them a call, give them an email, explain in detail what your situation is. You don't have to say thoughts, but just where you're at and getting treatment, what's stopping you getting treatment, and they'll be able to advise you. But 100% don't struggle alone. There is help, and these people are experts, at least in the UK, understanding kind of what's going on. So thank you, Catherine, for your time.
Yeah, pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I've loved it. And thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys. And check out Catherine's stuff, tamingolivia.com or .co.uk.
Yeah, .com
and theocdstories.com. And thank you.